the figure would be the blue, or it looks purple actually, it's supposed to be blue, would go up and the other one would go down. Because a lot of that income is actually exempted from tax, or a lot of that income is. But anyway, that doesn't strike me as terribly burdensome. If I make 33% of income, well, I should pay about 1/3% of tax. That's not even progressive. So I think we can knock that kind of thing on the head. What I want to do is take a look at this. This shows you the proportion of income that's paid in tax. I just want to set this up because we'll go to another table where it shows a better proportion. But as you can see, the lowest 10% pay 5% of their income on tax. The national average is about 20%, and the top pay 27%. Okay, 27%, it's not very much. And this is all from the EU data. The one thing, however, and this rarely gets into the discussion, is this data doesn't include VAT. The reason why that is because we individuals don't know how much VAT they pay. I can look at my payslip and see how much income tax I paid, PSI, levies, it's all like. But you have to really dig in to find out how much high income earners, low income earners, and all that pay on VAT. Luckily, we have that data from the study by the Combat Poverty Agency in the Israel, and you won't be surprised. But the lowest 10% income earners pay 20% of their income, all their income, whether it's social welfare or working income or whatever, 20% of their income on VAT. It falls to 9% at the very top. This is not unusual. VAT, a sales tax by definition, is regressive. So what I did was I layered on the VAT on top of the EU data. Now it's a bit of apples and oranges. It's two different methodologies, so it's only indicative. But I don't think I'm going to be that way too far off. What we see there is when you put VAT on the thing, we find that the lowest 10% pay over 1/4 of their income, their total income, on tax, PSI, and VAT. We find the national average is about 1/3. In fact, just dead on 1/3. And the top 10%, 37%. Now, this is marginally progressive. Marginally progressive. It is not, anyway, though, what I would call a progressive thing. Average tax pay is 1/3, and the highest income groups only pay like 3 or 4% more than the average. That is not progressive. That is not a progressive taxation system. Again, I would emphasize that this data does not include a lot of capital gains, capital inheritance, gifts, and a lot of other wealth. And if that was included, again, I think you might even find that the ratio of tax that the highest income earners pay is below the national average. I wouldn't want to push that too far, but as you can see, it's not that far. So no, we don't have a progressive income tax system. And that stuff about the highest income groups paying a huge amount of money is rubbish. If we don't have a lot of data about income, there is absolutely no official data whatsoever on wealth holdings. And what I mean by wealth is essentially all the property that you own, whether that's house, land, cars, pension fund, equities, investment stocks and bonds. We don't have data on that. But what we do have is Bank of Ireland private banking report that they published in 2007. Now this shows that the top 5% own 40% of all wealth in the country. Top 5%, 75,000 households own 40% of all wealth. The top 1%, 15,000 households, own 1/3 of all financial wealth. And that's really all wealth besides land and property. Again, that would be stocks, bonds, equities, cash, pension, commercial property. That would actually include commercial property, etc. Now, what does this really mean? Let's just meditate on this for a moment. The top 75,000 households in this country own 320 billion euros. 320 billion euros. That's about an average of 4 million each. I think I'm trying to do it quickly in my head. About between 4 and 4.5 million each. The top 1%, the 15,000 households, own 78 billion in financial wealth. 78 billion in financial wealth alone. I mean, if you just think about that, it would really do your head in. For instance, if you just said, okay, well, we'll just take a few percentage. Take a few percentage of, say, of a wealth tax on the highest wealth holders. Well, we wouldn't have a fiscal deficit, and we'd have enough money left over to put into health, education, support for indigenous enterprise, public and private enterprise. You could do a lot with that. But that is one area, of course, that is out of bounds in the current debate in terms of taxing. So, how would water charges fit in to this? We're going to layer on another €1 billion of income from water charges. How does it fit in? Obviously, we don't have data on water charges, but what we do have from the CSO Household Budget Survey, we have the effect on bin charges. Now, there, the lowest 10% pay 0.6%. This is back in 2005. And there, they were working on an average bin charge rate of about, I think, between 70 and €100 a year. Obviously, it's much higher. This is 2005 data. But what I want to do is show the difference between the highest and the lowest. There's 0.6. At the top, they only paid 0.1. In other words, it's 6 times as regressive. 6 times as regressive. But when you actually look at real life burden, because everybody talks about disposable income, you know, after tax. The problem is, even your after tax income is not disposable, because there are some things that you have to pay for. You have to pay for housing, utilities, you have to pay for food. So what I did, again, using the CSO budget survey, is I took out the cost of food, the cost of heating, you know, gas, electricity, telephone, the most fundamental things. I didn't take out, for instance, a lot of other necessities that people would have to have. You know, soap, shampoo, personal, all that data is in there. It's fantastic. You should go on sometime and look at the household budget survey. It's a real breakdown. But what it shows is when you just take the very basics of housing and utilities and food, when you take that out of the equation, then the bin charges itself is 1.4% on the lowest, but it's only still 0.2% on the very top. In other words, it's 7 times as regressive. That's what's coming down the line for people on that. This shouldn't again be surprising. This is the water tax burden from OECD data. As you can see, in France, you know, the orange or red is the effect on the lowest income groups, and the blue or purple, whatever it is the effect on the highest income groups. It's very regressive. You can see in France it's highly regressive. In England it's woefully regressive. Nearly 4% of people's income, according to the OECD data, 4% of people's gross income is paid on water charges over in England. If you're the lowest income group, there it's less than 0.5% at the highest income group. And there's an example of a developing country in Mexico. The effect is also dramatic. Now, when people talk about this €1 billion, it's kind of interesting because there's 2 arguments that are going to be used by the right in terms of pursuing water charges. First off is, well, we have to raise money. Okay? If that's the case, then it is a straightforward tax. But then others say, well, we have to incentivize efficient use of water. In other words, it kind of works like a sin tax, if you will. And therefore, the more efficient the people become, the less charge that they will face. It's kind of like cigarettes, for instance. You put a tax on cigarettes in order to limit their use, but the problem is that that kind of tax, if everybody stopped smoking cigarettes, then there'd be no revenue. So if everybody, according to one part of the argument, engaged in efficient use of water, there should theoretically be no tax revenue. But that's why the argument regarding the efficient use of resources is a bogus one. It's a pretext, because all we really want to do is another tax to raise money. But even then, let's look at that argument about efficient use of water. Now, for instance, an OECD study said that a 10% price rise in water reduces water use by 5%. Now, obviously, they're analyzing countries that already have water charges in use. Okay, we know that for low income, high income, we know the regressiveness. But it says here in this OECD data, high income households are less price elastic than low and medium income. That's a very fancy phrase for saying that the greatest burden of water use consumption owing to a water charge, the greatest reduction in water use comes from low and average income earners, which is not surprising because they're trying to get out from under a regressive tax. However, the people who use the most water, high-income households, don't respond to a tax. They're indifferent to whether there's a charge or the charge has been increased because it makes such a low amount of their income. So, in other words, I'll just throw this up here. It says actually the same thing. It's a study in Arizona water use in places like Arizona or Australia.